All right, here we go. Obadiah, the wonderful, wonderful work of Obadiah. Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament. It's 21 verses, fairly easy to read. So let's just kind of get our bearings straight on the book. Obadiah is the shortest book of the Old Testament. It seems that the prophet Obadiah considered each word a high-priced commodity. Apparently, he was unable to afford any words describing himself or his family in any way. Therefore, while 12 other men named Obadiah appear in Scripture, Old Testament scholars cannot identify with certainty any of them as the author of this book. Though the ultimate identity of this prophet is shrouded in mystery, Obadiah's emphasis on Jerusalem throughout the prophecy of judgment on the foreign nation of Edom allows us at least to presume that Obadiah was from somewhere near the holy city in the southern kingdom of Judah. So dating the book of Obadiah accurately is nearly impossible due to the little historical information obtained in the book. While several options have been proposed by scholars, the best argument places Obadiah in the 840s BC, making him the earliest writing prophet. A few years prior to Joel and a contemporary of Elisha. The biggest piece of evidence for this early date comes from Obadiah 1:10 through 14. We'll get to that, which indicates an Edomite invasion of Jerusalem. While Edom was too weak of a nation to ever invade Judah on its own, Edom no doubt participated in other nations when the winds of change blew in its favor. In the 840s, when Edom rebelled against King Jeroboam of Judah, the Philistines and the Arabians also invaded Jerusalem. That's in 2 Corinthians. While 2 Chronicles does not indicate the Edomites participated in the invasion, Obadiah 1:10 through 14 pictures the violent behavior that the Edomites carried out on their neighbors, waiting on nearby roads to cut down their fleeing from the invaders within Jerusalem. The Edomites could have easily heard of Jerusalem's invasion by foreign powers and entered themselves into the fray so that they too might benefit from plundering their neighbors in Jerusalem. The majority of the book pronounces judgment on the foreign nation of Edom, making Obadiah one of three prophets who pronounce judgment primarily on other nations. Who are the other two? Nahum and Habakkuk. All right, very good. I just wanted to say Habakkuk. While others of the prophetic books contain passages of judgment against Edom and other nations, Obadiah's singular focus points to a significant, albeit difficult, truth about humanity's relationship with God. When people remove themselves from or place themselves in opposition to God's people, they can expect judgment rather than restoration at the end of life. Obadiah's name means worshiper of Yahweh, offers an interesting counterpoint to the message of judgment he pronounced on Edom. Judah's neighbor to the southeast is a worshiper of Yahweh. Obadiah placed himself in a position of humility before the Lord. He embraced his holy place before the Almighty. That God sent a man named worshiper of Yahweh to the people of Edom was no mistake. Edom had been found guilty of the pride before the Lord. That's Obadiah chapter 1, verse 3. They had thought themselves greater than they actually were, great enough to mock, steal from, and even harm God's chosen people. But the Lord God, a name Obadiah used to stress God's sovereign power over the nations, will not stand idle by and let his people suffer forever. Through Obadiah, God reminded Edom of their poor treatment of his people, promised redemption not to the Edomites, but to the people of Judah. The nation of Edom, which eventually disappeared into history, remains one of the prime examples of the truth found in Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. Obadiah's prophecy focuses on the destructive power of pride. Sounds familiar. It reminds us of the consequences of living in a self-serving manner or following through on our own feelings and desires without considering their impact on those around us. Struggling to put our wants and our desires for ourselves above God. Though such pride has been part of the lives of fallen human beings since the tragedy of the fall of Eden, Obadiah offers us a stark reminder to place ourselves under God's authority, to subject our appetites to his purpose, and to find our hope in being his people with the restoration of all things to come. So, Obadiah is a guy that writes a book talking about the destruction of the Edomites. I give us a map here. Hope you can see that. There's the kingdom of Edom. You can kind of picture where you are on the map. There's the kingdom of Judah over here, the kingdom of Moab, the Ammonites up there. There's Jericho, Sea of Galilee. So you have the kingdom of Edom, and their capital town there called Petra. So the Edomites, the history. All right. So who are the Edomites descendants of? Esau. Very good. And who was Esau's brother? Jacob. Did Jacob and Esau like each other? No. How long did they not like each other? From the very beginning, right? One of the craziest verses in all the Bibles, like when he reached up there and grabbed the guy's the foot, like, no, I want to go first, right? So here's what happened. There's a deep hatred between Esau and Jacob, which spills over into Israel and the Edomites. And the Edomites were the descendants of Esau, okay? So I put this on here because I just have some verses, right? So you can go write these down. This is in the book of Genesis here. Genesis chapter 25, verse 30. He said to Jacob, let me eat some of the red stuff because I'm exhausted. Who's this speaking? Oh, why didn't it go? Do what? How's that? He said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stuff because I'm exhausted. This is why he was also named Edom. So from the very beginning, Esau receives, do it. What? What's bad? Oh, I got you. Oh, y'all, that's like a bad preacher joke, right? Give him some Edom, so he's called Edom. That's very good. Thank you, Mr. Jim, for clarifying that. Very good. All right, here we go. Genesis 32:3. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the territory of Edom. So Esau's sent out. Jacob comes after him. The Edomites are so this is their land. All right, this is just some history, quick verses. Chapter 36, verse 8 of Genesis. So Esau, that is Edom, lived in the mountains of Seir. So one of the things that the Edomites were proud of is that they lived up on these mountains, right? They lived up on the mountains, and people would come through and they would attack from the mountain top, all right? And so these are the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these are their chiefs, so the descendants there. Verse 36, chapter 36, verse 43. Chief Magdiel and Chief Eram, these are Edom's chiefs. According to their settlements in the land they possessed, Esau was the father of the Edomites. And here's what happens in the book of Numbers, verse 14. Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. This is what your brother Israel says. You know all the hardships that have overtaken us. Please let us travel through your land. We won't travel through any field or vineyard or drink any well water. We will travel the king's highway. We won't turn to the right or to the left, and we will travel through the territory. So the nation of Israel is trying to get to the promised land, being sent out, right? And so they're like, dude, let us through your land. But verse 18. When Edom answered them, you will not travel through our land, or we will come out and we will confront you with the sword. Verse 19, we will go on the main road. The Israelites will say to them, and our herds drink, and if we drink your water, we'll pay the price. Then there will be no problem. Let us travel through on foot. Verse 20, Edom insisted, you cannot travel through and they came out to confront them with a large force of heavily armed people. The Edomites are like, you're not coming through our land. Then you get down to the book of Judges. Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom saying, please let us travel through your land. But the king of Edom would not listen. They also sent messengers to the king of Moab, but he refused. So Israel stayed in Kadesh. 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 47. When Saul assumed the kingship over Israel, he fought against all his enemies in every direction, against the Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the king of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he caused havoc. 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 14. He placed a garrison throughout Edom, and all the Edomites were subject to David. The Lord made David victorious wherever he went. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 14. So the Lord raised up Hadad the Edomite as an enemy against Solomon. He was of the royal family in Edom. Verse 15, earlier, when David was in Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, had gone to bury the dead, had struck down every male in Edom. For Joab and all of Israel had remained there 6 months until he had killed every male in Edom. Verse 17, Hadad fled to Egypt along with some Edomites from his father's servants. At the time, Hadad was a small boy. 2 Kings chapter 8, verse 20. During Jeroboam's reign, Edom rebelled against Judah's control and appointed their own king. So Jeroboam crossed over to Zaar with all of his chariots. Then at night he sent and attacked the Edomites who surrounded him and the chariot commander, but his troops fled to their tents. So Edom is still in rebellion against Judah's control today. Lebna also rebelled at this time. I just put these in there that there is a deep hatred between the Edomites and the Israelites. And the Edomites refused to let the Israelites pass through their land. And so God says to the Edomites, I'm going to judge you, and you're going to be destroyed. And so that's how we get the book of Obadiah. So let's start in verse 1 of Obadiah. God sends a promise here, verse 1. This is what the Lord God said about Edom. We've heard a message from the Lord. An envoy has been sent among the nations. Rise up, let's go to war against her. Look, I will make you insignificant among the nations. You will be deeply despised. Your arrogant heart has deceived you. You who live in clefts on the rock, in your home on the heights, who say to yourself, who can bring me down from the ground? Though you seem to soar like an eagle and make your nest among the stars, even from there I will bring you down. This is the Lord's declaration. So just kind of underline a few things here, particularly verses 3 and 4. The downfall of the Edomites was their what? Their pride, their arrogance. I heard a sermon on Sunday morning. The preacher said, pride will destroy your life. He's a great guy. He's a good guy too. Owes me $20, but anyway. But here you have another picture of pride. You have another picture of a nation who says, look at us. We're up on the mountaintops. Nobody can get us. Nobody can take us. And God says, your arrogant heart has deceived you. And I just underline that because this is just a truth in life. Your arrogant heart will deceive you. Your pride will deceive you. This is one of the things, and I said this a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say it again, and you're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming weeks. Get you a book. I'm going to order some blue books of Proverbs. Get you a proverb blue book and read a proverb a day. Just read a proverb every single day. And here's what you're going to learn. I was telling the staff this. I do this in my own life to my own ability. And we read a proverb before every staff meeting. Here's what reading through the Proverbs has done. First, it is a constant reminder that pride will destroy your life. It's just a daily reminder that your arrogant pride will just destroy you, and to stay humble in the Lord. And so I just think that this is incredibly important. So here's you have this Edomite nation. Here's what he says about him. You live in clefts on the rock. Your home is on the heights. You say in a kind of a bragging way, who can bring me down to the ground, right? You seem to soar like an eagle. You make your nest among the stars. But God says this, even from there, I will bring you down. This is the Lord's declaration. Then in verse 5, hello? That's okay. If thieves come to you, if marauders by night, how ravaged you would be. Wouldn't they steal only what they wanted? If grape harvesters came to you, wouldn't they leave a few grapes? How Esau will be pillaged, his hidden treasures searched out. Everyone who has a treaty with you will drive you to the border. Everyone at peace with you will deceive and conquer you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you. He will be unaware of it. In that day, this is the Lord's declaration. Will I not eliminate the wise ones of Edom and those who understand from the hill country of Esau? Taman, your warriors will be terrified, so that everyone from the hill country of Esau will be destroyed by slaughter. The judgment of the Lord. I'm gonna say something. Just remind me to say something at the end. Verse 10. He says this: "You will be covered with shame and destroyed forever because of violence done to your brother Jacob." Man, I don't know about you guys. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in close people's lives. Hatred between two people just leads to destruction. Hatred within a family, destruction. I recently was a part of a funeral where only part of the family showed up. The other part didn't show up because there was deep hatred between the siblings. And it broke my heart. Mama had passed away, and the families would not gather together. And this is what you see here. These are two brothers. These twin brothers, Jacob and Esau. This is 1,000 years later. And the hatred just runs deep. And he says here, you'll be destroyed and covered for shame. Verse 11, on that day you stood aloof. On the day strangers captured his wealth, while foreigners entered his city gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were just like one of them. So here's what he's saying. The Edomites really did two things. The Edomites sat on the cliff and said, no, you can't pass through our land. If you do, we're going to meet you. But then also when Jerusalem was attacked by other nations, the Edomites were like, hey, this looks like a good opportunity to plunder them as well. And so this is what he's writing about now. He says, on that, you stood aloof. When Jerusalem was attacked, you didn't stand up for your brother. On the strangers captured his wealth, foreigners entered the city gate, cast lots for Jerusalem. And he says this, you were just like one of them. Do not gloat over your brother in the day of his calamity. Do not rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction. Do not boastfully mock in the day of distress. Do not enter my people's city gates in the day of their disaster. Yes, you, do not gloat over the misery in the day of the disaster, and do not appropriate their possessions in the day of their disaster. So I mean, it's like Edom's like celebrating in the destruction of Jerusalem and the other nations coming after them and destroying them, and God's like, this is a problem. You can't do this, right? Verse 14, do not stand on the crossroads to cut off their fugitives. Do not hand over their survivors in the day of their distress. So Israel's fleeing from the nations, Edomites capturing them and saying, nope, you're going to be a fugitive. They're all over the place in verse 15. For the day of the Lord is near against all the nations. So what happens here in all of the minor prophets, he jumps from talking to the Edomites to then talking to the nations at large in a bigger picture. So this is what's happening here. The day of the Lord is near against all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. What you deserve will return on your head. As you have drunk on my holy mountain, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and gulp down and be as though they had never been. So what's that a picture of? Drinking what? The judgment of God, right? It's just a picture, right? I mean, it's not talking about you're going to drink sweet tea, right? Or whatever else you may imply there. But he's saying you're going to drink the judgment. You're going to drink on the judgment there. You're going to drink continually. They'll drink, they'll gulp down. But there will be a deliverance on Mount Zion, and it will be holy. The house of Jacob will dispose, but who disposed them? Then the house of Jacob will be a blazing fire, the house of Joseph a burning flame, and the house of Esau will be stubble. Jacob will set forth on fire and consume Edom. Therefore no survivor will remain of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. Just complete annihilation. People from the Negev will possess the hill country of Esau. Those from the Judean foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will possess the terrorists of Ephraim and Samaria, while Benjamin possesses Gilead. The exiles of the Israelites who are in Hala and who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, as well as the exiles of Jerusalem who are in Saphrad, who possess the cities of the Negev. Saviors will assume Mount Zion to rule over the hill country of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. just this destruction of that. So as you know, I encourage you to just read through the Bible every year. Like, just read through the Bible, right? We talked about Amos last week. Here's what I think of when I read through the book of of Obadiah. And this may be a little too simplification of the book, but this is what I think of. I have 4 kids in my house, 4 beautiful, wonderful children who I hugged tight last night. And I love them. And they're finishing up the 9th grade, 8th grade, 7th grade, and 6th grade. And I think they're amazing. But sometimes my kids don't agree on things. Sometimes we play a game and there's a disagreement. Sometimes they differ on who's the possessor of certain items. But I read Obadiah, and there's a determinant in my heart to not let my 4 children grow up and hold grudges against each other and not love each other. I read this book and I think Esau and Jacob, from the moment they were born, from the moment brother came out, they hated each other. They robbed from each other. They stole each other, unforgiving of each other, taking from one another. And I'm just determined. They may grow up and I don't know what they're going to do, but I am just determined in my heart to make sure that, and I've said this before, say 2 things and I'm done. I forgive you. Will you forgive me? And I forgive you. And we're not going to hold grudges and we're not going to stay mad. Because you've seen it in your life. I've seen it in my life. Kids, families are ripped to pieces, deep hatred and seated between siblings and family members. And it happens and it's sad. And God says to the Edomites here, your hatred and disgust and your treatment of Israel is going to bring judgment on you and you will be destroyed. And so just a challenge for us in life as we grow up. So.